And welcome back to day one of the Mackinac Policy Conference. I'm Christy McDonald. Thanks so much for joining us from the parlor of the Grand Hotel. We are going to be taking you through the week as we cover some of the most important issues that Michigan is facing today, and one of them is investment and business investment here in the state of Michigan. Joining me now to talk about that is Jeff Donofrio. He is the CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan. And Jeff, it's good to see you. I think you're one of the people that people really want to bend their ear at this conference, talking about how do we grow our business community right now?
Well, there's lots to talk about.
Yeah.
We have, I think, a lot to celebrate in Michigan that has gone right. When we look back in 2009, where we were as a state, we were 49th out of 50. We were at the bottom of the barrel. Since then, we've come to 29th as a state. So we've gone from bottom to middle, and that's something to celebrate. But getting from middle to top is going to be harder. It's going to take more, I think, persistence and investment and trying to make sure that we're taking on the headwinds that are facing Michigan.
You know, I think we keep coming back to the phrase cohesive strategy, and making sure that everyone is on board, from policies that make it easier for business to do business in the state, to being something called, you said, shovel ready. The Detroit Econ Club just a couple of weeks ago saying that we are not a shovel ready state, and you look around and that there are other states that are. What do we need to have in place? Or talk to me about some of the things that we need as Michigan to be more competitive, to get out of that 29th place and move.
Well, I think it's important because, states are not waiting for Michigan to compete to win. They're not waiting for Michigan to catch up. States like Tennessee that just received that Blue Oval investment from Ford, they've been investing in shovel-ready sites for more than 20 years. States like Tennessee and Kentucky have been putting in place education programs, and Georgia that have now made Kentucky more educated than Michigan for post-secondary degrees, and Tennessee being right on our heels. So that investment is so important for us to be competitive. We just put out a plan that said, here's how Michigan can reach the top, and it's got 4 real pillars. We've got to do better by our kids. We've got to have the world-class K-12 system that we all know we want to promise to our kids, that high school diploma will actually be recognized as something that will give opportunity across the board. Will give opportunity that doesn't exist today, and we're not doing that, unfortunately. We've got to invest in people too, that adults who don't have degrees, who have barriers to work. This I think pandemic showed us how important childcare and elder care is to keeping people in the workforce, to making sure they can progress in a career. We got to do more of that barrier removal. We've got to help people get back into the workforce because we're 41st in labor force participation in this state. And then we've got to make sure that we have an accelerating economy, right? That we are growing, that we are competitive with those shovel-ready sites, with the best-in-class incentives and workforce development talent solutions, so that companies want to come here and invest. We make it easy for them. And then finally, we got to get the fundamentals right. We have to have infrastructure where we don't have roads that are going to, cost us thousands of dollars a year, with car repairs that are not going to allow shipping to be easy. We've got to make sure that we're a welcoming state, that we have protections for individuals in the workplace, including our LGBTQ plus community, and we've got to make sure that we're, attracting people, immigrants in particular, to the state to help us grow.
So that is a multi-pronged, plan there. And when you start having these conversations, what do you think the biggest sticking point for Michigan is right now? Or the first, I guess, not to be cheap about it, but the lowest hanging fruit that you can achieve to then get to the next phase.
So we've got this unique opportunity in our history, $10 billion of one-time money, of surpluses in the state budget, and of federal dollars that we can invest to make Michigan a more competitive state, to help us accelerate towards a path of being top 10. Now, what is, I think, unclear is, are we going to choose to invest today? Are we going to let this opportunity pass us by? Or are we going to look back in 10 years and say, man, we were smart, we did strategic things, and today we're on a different path? Now, when you look at what is potentially the most opportunistic right now, I think there's some really important K-12 investments that have to happen. We are losing thousands of teachers every year, and that only accelerated during the pandemic. We've got to get more teachers into the profession. We've got to make sure that they're in the classroom and supported.
How do you incentivize that? Are we looking at maybe wiping away some college debt for people who want to go into teaching? Is that raising a salary, or what are we looking at?
All of the above,
Okay.
Right? We need to make sure teaching is a respected position that people want to go into. I think today teachers are telling, younger people coming up, don't go into the profession, right? We're 41st in terms of entry wage for the teaching profession. We see that, if you go through a program at one of our universities, you're not being paid for your student teaching. You're actually paying for that tuition.
Fifth year, he's at fifth year of undergrad, yeah.
So can we do something to reverse that? Could we do some debt forgiveness? Because it's very expensive to become a teacher and to have that continuous learning that happens. We should be supporting teachers in every way possible. We've also got to make sure we get more money in the classroom so that kids are getting the best possible education. When we look at top 10 states in education, we're underinvesting by $2,000 a year. So we've got to find ways to build more efficiencies into the system. Does every school district need to have its own accounting department or IT department? Maybe we can combine some of those.
Yeah, maybe some of the ISDs can step in and take care of some of those things with the district. Let's talk, though, about higher ed, because we have not invested in higher ed in the state of Michigan. We pulled back starting in the early 2000s, and it has been abysmal. And we see the cost of college just rising and rising. What is being done, or what are some of the conversations about investing more in higher ed? Because we need to have a population that has that advanced degree.
And this is not just for the sake of education and for getting a degree, right? This is about competitiveness. This is about our future economy and what it's going to look like. Because we know the top states in the country with the best economies, the most resilient economies to recession, are those that have the most educated workforce. So we have to help people be able to get into college. So programs like the Reconnect that Tennessee actually pursued first, where you get anybody who doesn't have a college diploma who's over the age of 25, and you give them a tuition-free pathway to a community college to get that degree, to start on their pathway to a 4-year. Those are really critical that we have those programs in place for decades to be able to raise our education rate. Programs that help remove barriers too, because it's not just getting into college, it's completing college. And some of the worst debt we have is for those individuals who've never actually completed that degree because they don't get the benefit of having put that money in place and investing in themselves. So all the ways that we can get more people into college and into apprenticeship programs, because the construction and skilled trades industry has as many talent gaps as anyone.
Yeah, and so tell me what some of the business leaders are telling you about filling jobs and the jobs that they have, because you represent some of the most powerful people in the state and saying, look, we still can't fill these positions.
We do a quarterly economic survey of our CEOs, and we have 94 board members who are CEOs at the largest employers in Michigan. 87% of them say they're going to have trouble filling jobs in the next 6 to 12 months. And they focus really on the fact that there are not enough applicants, so they're just not getting enough people coming in the door, and that those applicants that they do have skills gaps. They don't have the education that they're looking for. They don't have the resources, the credentials. And again, we can do things right now with this one-time money to accelerate and close.
You're talking awful lot about Tennessee, gets mentioned, Kentucky, Georgia,
Sure.
Indiana. They won the Stellantis plant just recently. And what are people saying about Michigan? So are they having conversations in Tennessee saying, well, in Michigan they're doing, what can we tout that we're doing here? Or when we step back and we say, okay, Michigan, we got to up our game a little bit here.
Last year, we had at our board retreat a conversation about Michigan's competitiveness and how we rank against other states for new investment. And CEO after CEO after CEO was telling us stories about how they chose Indiana or Ohio or Tennessee or Kentucky or Georgia because the customer service was best in class. They brought you in, and it was a seamless transition. You didn't have to worry about going to 5 different agencies. You didn't have to worry about going to 5 different regulatory organizations to get your permits. They had a one-stop shop. And they were simple, and it was a quick process. They talked about the fact that the incentives were competitive, but incentives don't win the project on its own. It really just closes the deal. You have to have competitive incentives, though, to be in the game. They talked about the fact that you had to have talent and talent solutions, because businesses know that you may not have everyone ready to go immediately, but you got to have a solution to be able to get those folks into the door and ready to work. And then finally, they said there are sites that are developed and shovel ready. And frankly, Michigan has not invested in that in the same way that these states have. And when you talk to site selectors who are making these decisions, helping companies choose where to locate, they say it's not setting you apart to do site selection or site development now, to invest in infrastructure and make sure that those places are shovel ready. It's expected. And Michigan is behind the 8 ball on that, unfortunately.
So what's the group? Who are the people that are going to sit down in the room? Is it 20 people? Is it, and then, bringing it forth to our legislature and our lawmakers and saying, all right, these are the policies that have to go in place. What's the room? And a timeline that we can say, this will make a positive impact if we get something or a cohesive plan in place in the next 8 months.
So we have seen that.
And I don't mean to have you solve everything right now, Jeff.
Come on. I'm good, but maybe not that good. But, we need to have persistence to a strategy because this stuff takes years to really fix and to make progress on. We can do a lot right now, but I think the term limits reform is going to help us be able to get the right people in the room for a longer period of time.
Right, that
so
they're not
their
constantly running
consistency.
for re-election and then changing, and you've got a new crop of people in
right.
there, and you've got to educate from the beginning because, we've studied education.
That's right.
We've looked at K-12 and the value of it and what we need to do to turn it around, and that was 5 years ago.
Look at the progress we made in December with creating the SOAR Fund, which was an incentive program with $1 billion that helped do some proactive site development in December. The governor, legislative leaders came together on the Republican side of the aisle, and it was a bipartisan effort that really put Michigan in a different place. So those conversations we were having in the fall changed once that program was in place. Now, we have to continue, right, to expand on that, to deepen our work in economic development. But those leaders who were in place in December, they'll be gone in January. So, the governor, of course, may be in place, should she be reelected, and I think that's looking more and more likely, but the legislative leaders will be gone. So there's not that consistency. So we need to be able to form this coalition both inside and outside government with the business community, with foundations, with, I think, average voters who demand that we are persistent towards a strategy that's going to make Michigan more competitive.
And, this is the room to do it in. We
right.
looked through the parlor and I saw you sitting back there and having a couple of conversations. I'm like, I wonder what Jeff is talking about, and I'll ask him when he comes to sits on the desk. But I think it's really interesting that this is finally, a place. In the Mackinac Policy Conference has always been that opportunity to be able to talk to people. It feels though for the last 2 years we've been in our silos a bit because of the pandemic and only really concentrating on what our organizations are doing and kind of just getting through. What are the things that you hope to take out of this week when you leave the island on Friday then?
I hope there's more of an urgency recognized that we have issues, we have headwinds that are facing Michigan, and there's got to be an urgency at addressing those. But we have lots of ability to solve them if we come together. And we have this once-in-a-generation opportunity to have $10 billion invested, and again, solving these problems, accelerating our growth. We've seen over the last couple of decades, we've underinvested. I think transportation alone, we've underinvested at the $3 billion a year annually. We need to find ways to continue to build more of that investment so that in 10 or 20 years, we're going to look different as a state. The other thing we've got to do is have a recognition that all of us having conversations here on the island is a really good thing. And if we align ourselves, that's great. But we've got to make sure the voters and the public understand the issues as well. And this is key in education because we did a voter survey in February and asked, where do you rank Michigan in education? And they put us right in the middle at average. They said their local school district was above average or excellent. If they don't recognize that there's a problem, because every statistic and data point that we have says we are below average as a state, and that every district is underperforming its peers in other states. So if we don't recognize that, the urgency to change is not going to be there.
It's not going to come. All right, Jeff Donofrio, the CEO of Business Leaders for Michigan. It's always good to see you. A lot to think about, and can't wait to check in with you in the next couple of months and to see where things stand.
Great to see you too. Thanks for having me.
Take care. And we'll be right back. Stay with us.